Welcome to the Messy Podcast, the Messy Truth Podcast.
I love the messy truth. Your messy truth.
No, for those people listening, Paige is my longest and best friend. We've been friends for 19 years. It's crazy. Since our babies were babies, we met when in a breastfeeding support group. When Grant and Remy were just little guys, little babies, and we've been, as we say, we fell in love and have been best friends ever since all those years ago.
So fun. We used to AOL message each other. Do you remember? We would get hanging out all day and then go on our laptops, and it was like the time of AOL Messenger.
You see, that's what I was like referring to the other day. I miss those days.
Yeah.
We used to talk like constantly because we were falling in love. Isn't it funny? I mean, I think people sometimes...
But by the way, we still talk constantly.
No.
We're busier now.
Yeah, because we were just moms.
We were just moms.
Yeah, not that just moms, but we
had a lot more time and space, and we got to make our plans around being a mom. So it was, we're going to do stroller strides, and we're going to do this music class, and then we're just going to take them to Target. Whatever. Go to lunch.
Remy would fall asleep in the shopping cart and wake up. If you've been following along my journey, you've probably seen me or heard me talk a lot about Paige and how I like to say I ride her spiritual coattails. It's just the perfect way to describe it. I feel like you've had quite a journey.
Yeah, what's really awakened my own soul's evolution is it has been all the messy things. Divorce, my parents' divorce, childhood abuse, just lots of unpacking the density that I've been carrying my whole life. From childhood, which I think in my spiritual vernacular and my beliefs, most humans are impacted by past life occurrences and childhood occurrences. So as an adult, we're really working through those things. And so, to take us back to where I really kind of deep dove into it is about 6 years ago. All my life I've been a seeker. I've been through various spiritual teachers and communities, and also been a rebel and been completely selfish on my own agenda as well. Mm-hmm. But there's just always been kind of a whisper of your soul wants more. Something isn't going to take you here. Mm-hmm. And going through my own realization that I'm restless, that I was dissatisfied in life, that I was really not able to be with a man. Like, that was all based on my childhood relationship with my father, who I still, love and have so much compassion for and am in a relationship with. But the ancestral trauma that my dad brought in to our family really impacted the way I showed up as an adult. Like, it showed up in all my relationships, sort of in our relationship. Like, I was really angry. I was judgmental. I was abusive myself.
Isn't it funny how we are that, that person who abused us or didn't treat us well, and then how we don't even realize that we're doing that ourselves. Like, that has been the biggest eye-opener for me.
Totally. Same. I think because we didn't know any other way, right? Like, we think our family was I thought and again, it's like, there's duality in it. Like, do I love my family? Yes. My family of origin, did it have its beautiful moments? Yes. And was I even aware of the pain and the trauma that was really laced in there? No, not until much later, when I kept getting this inner resistance, this outer resistance from people, having my own relationship conflicts. Like, the world is your mirror. So how you're showing up someplace really indicates the vibration that you're working with.
Yes.
And that became really acute, really after my second divorce. And then I started seeking a little bit more of a balanced path. Just like, okay, I don't want to feel so much agitation all the time, so much judgment, so much control. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, I really had this inner calling to get back to spirit and to get back aligned with my higher self. And so, 6 years ago, I met my teacher, Jan, who lives in Taos, New Mexico, as you know well, and started down a path that was at first kind of unconscious. I was like, oh, I'm going to start doing these retreats with her, and I'm going to just get better, be a better human. And 20-something retreats later, I have really changed in a way that I don't even really recognize my old self. I mean, she's there in like a really faded out pixely gray version, but I feel like the work I've been on the last 6 years with Jan, and just my own seeking through other healers, teachers, books, friendships. I mean, it's all potent. It's all medicine. It's all grist for the mill, as Ram Dass says. And so this whole time, I've just really, what I would say, I just let things in, rinse them out, move them out. So it's kind of like an inner cleansing, like without resistance or hesitation. You can let it all in, all the shit, all the sticky stuff, all the mess. Work with that, rinse it, pray about it, meditate, heal it, and then let it out. Yeah. So it's like being an open vessel for that. As you saw just on my last retreat, like a lot of anger and grief came up. Yeah. And I just had to remove it. I had to channel it out. I had to cry it out, yell it out, and then it's gone.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me having, gone through a lot of pain in the last year for sure. But even, and you and I have very similar paths, similar upbringings, have been through divorces. You're on your third marriage, which you're so proud of. Yeah. How for me, there's been a lot of shame around getting divorced again, which I'm getting better about. But it's interesting. What's so fascinating to me, and like when you say, brings it out, it's like, I think that so many people, and I think you use this term more than me, but like spiritual bypassing. Mm-hmm. And, I see it in people close to me and I see it in myself too. And I see how I did it for most of my life, where it's like, you don't want to really feel the pain. Of course you don't want to feel the pain. And then once you do, for whatever reason, start to deep dive, figure out what's going on and all the things that you're talking about, you start to like change and evolve as a human. And it's really beautiful. But I think that it's so hard for most people to want to do that.
Well, most people are living in a state of avoiding discomfort. Like that is the culture we live in. Like if there's anything wrong, there's anything you're agitated by, you're meant to like just get out of it, go away, or again, avoid it. Like we are a real like culture of avoidance, distraction. And so running towards the tiger, which I like to say, which I say to you all the time, like, just don't resist what you're feeling. Like, feel it to the point it alchemizes. Otherwise, you're just stuffing it in a different compartment of your body, and it will come out sideways somewhere. Like, I think it was Carl Jung said something like, you can hack your way through the path, but you will still end up at the fire you left untended. So it's like, there's always that fire that's burning that you have to come back to.
Yeah.
And put it out.
Yeah. Well, it's like, for me, like understanding that as I do, which is like, I just did a post about this, was like, what is joy to you? Like that was the post. The question that I was answering, and it was like, well, it's complicated now. If you had asked me a couple of years ago, I would have been like, joy is, I don't know, my beautiful house and my amazing kids and like the life that I get to live, which it is, but so now I'm starting to understand like the joy and the pain, like all that we learn from and embracing it. I actually, when I was in the airport, I picked up this book called Happiness and like Emotional Intelligence. It's like a Harvard. Mm-hmm. And so, because I like to get like all angles, right? So it's like, I want to hear like the scholarly, their point of view on it. And it was interesting because like this therapist or psychologist, whatever, was talking about this, there's all these different studies that are in this little book. It's really interesting. And one of the things he's talking about is joy and happiness is like, it has been the goal for so long. And it's just not like it's not actually real. You know, I mean, I'm paraphrasing what they said, but just something like, you know, you don't get, it's like, it's okay if you're not happy. Like, you don't need to be happy all the time. That's not the goal.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's that we are, to your point, we're raised in a society where like, that is the goal. Be happy, get the, like, you know, one of the articles started out with like, you know, I have this great husband, I have a beautiful son, another kid on the way, this great house, blah, blah. Why am I not happy? You know? And it's like this seeking, and it's like when you know, allow yourself to not need to be happy all the time. I mean, this is probably my own stuff that I'm working through, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that dictates that happiness is outside you.
Yeah.
It dictates that happiness comes from acquisition of things.
Right.
And it also, happiness is, again, it's just another feeling. It's not a state of being.
Yeah.
So if you take happiness and you put it in the pile of emotions, like Brene Brown talks about, like there's like hundreds of words for how you feel emotions. And we really just use 3, like happy, sad, mad. Mm-hmm. And those are feelings. And no one wants to be sad or mad. So we tend to default to happy. But it's not a state of being, which is really what, for me, the goal is. Like, the goal for me is to feel just like in no resistance to what is. Mm-hmm. And then when the happiness comes, it's even better. Mm-hmm. And when the sadness comes, it's not so sad.
Yeah.
So it's like
almost being like in the middle.
Yeah.
Which you and I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
I struggle with quite a bit. And I also think it's like when you think about, you know, being an entrepreneur and having like had success, and, you know, it's like, oh, that's happiness, or that's like where the goal is, you know?
Yeah. And that, again, like, and there's no judgment for any of this. Like, when I had my event planning company for 7 years with my partner, Kelly, like, we were at the top of our game when we sold. I mean, we were doing lots of celebrity and influencer weddings. Right. And I got to the point where people were coming to hire us, and they'd be like, our wedding's going to be at a villa in Italy or at like the chateau in France. And we were just like, you can't pay me enough to do it anymore. Mm. And people were just from the outside going, what? Like, you're living the life. Like, you're getting paid thousands and thousands of dollars to go spend 2 weeks in France, to go like do this big wedding in Mexico, to this big wedding on Hawaii. And it was just like, you don't understand, one, the stress levels, the toxicity, the bullshit, the real like harm to the planet that these events cause. Like, just so many things that I was not paying attention to, because my goal was to make money. Mm-hmm. Like, and I made money. And I was like, okay, this person's now going to pay us. Like, I remember in one of our last meetings with the client who we did a wedding tour. We went to Utah, Palm Springs, New York, and Switzerland, and did 5 weddings for this couple. And lovely people, and they became our friends, and it was great. But at that point, we were like, we're so depleted. Our soul is exhausted. There is no space, no time for family, for friends, for balance. There was no joy. There's no happiness. Mm-hmm. But there was outward success. We had a book with Rizzoli. We had, and then, we just had this other event called The Cream that was really successful. And at that point, I had gone through my second divorce, and I was like, my life is not good. Mm-hmm. Externally, it looks like it. Mm-hmm. But inside, I'm rotting. Yeah. I'm rotting inside. Yeah. And so now I make no money. I make very little money. And the amount of sheer light and joy that I feel is incredible. Yeah. And the state of balance and equanimity and the flow state is so much more available. Not that I don't get stressed, not that I don't get anxious, not that I don't want to make money. None of that's bad. Yeah. I'm just saying, if your outer and inner aren't lined up, right, then something needs to get paid attention to, and usually that's going to take you on a journey, the inner journey. The spiral.
Yeah. I mean, I so relate to that, and I'm sure people listening do too, because I think that there is this conflict that we have society with what society deems as success and worthiness and whatever, versus what feels good in our body, and it's I just, came back from a whirlwind trip where I was in Indiana and then Nashville. And I was like going, from plane to plane and car to car and, doing a TED talk and speaking on another thing and,
all good things.
All good things.
Yeah.
And like, wow, her life looks so amazing. And I, post the highlight reel of that music and the thing. But I came home and I was even telling you on that trip, I was so tired and so depleted. I was like, it's not even like I was on like anything. It wasn't like that crazy. It was like 3 or 4 days, but just like even the like hustling and bustling and going on car, I get really nauseous in cars and getting in cars and out of cars, on planes and off planes. And I was like, I just can't do this anymore, and it's similar. It resonated a lot with what you're saying, because I was like, I think I'm so depleted. Mm-hmm. Like even now I've been home for 2 days and I'm like just barely starting to feel calm again. But it's just, I think I have to believe, besides the fact that I'm 40, almost 49 years old, but I have to believe that it's like it's my body and me being more than ever connected to my inner body and go like, this isn't work. Mm-hmm. Like you can't do this anymore. Yeah. And I did it for years. I mean, I went to the first 50 openings of Dry Bar and like, I was like, also just not paying attention to anything else. It was on this like fast track and it was amazing and fun. And I was younger and I think we change as we get older too. But, just, it's been really, it's fascinating to me. And I think about the, Michael Singer reference. For anybody who doesn't know Michael Singer, he has a book called The Untethered Soul and many others, and he's so great. And Paige and I both love him and his work. But I remember like feeling such a profound, it hitting me so profoundly when he talked about your life is like watching a movie of your life. And I think about that so much, and I'm like, yeah, I'm watching myself. Like I'm literally watching myself like run around like a crazy person, making other people happy, making what I think is happy, and being like, this is not it for me anymore, and trying to find like the balance of what I want to be doing with my time, what I don't want to be doing with my time, similar to what you're saying, it's like, it's sad because, it's not sad, but I don't know what the right word is. It's like what you said, it's like you were making a lot of money in the event space, and now you're not making as much money, but you're happier. And like, how do you get both? Is it both matter?
Yeah. And it's like, I think there's a time for both, right? Like, I think, which we talked about this too, like there's a death cycle and a life cycle. Like there is constant bardos of birth, life, and death, like even in this lifetime. Yeah. So I think in one space, I might be burning karma or in a death cycle around money. And in another space, I'm really alive and creative and in a flow state around my spiritual path. Yeah. So there's like I think it's going to catch up, like I think there will be, like if I'm meant to be in this specific dharma of spiritual facilitating and leadership and guide, whatever that might be, I think the money will come. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't need to be millions, but it needs to support my family, of course, and like get me enough to feel, cared for.
The guy who started Tom's. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I know this about him. I don't know if I've read it or someone's told me, which is why I want to be respectful of like what's out in the public about him. But like I know, it's like this is a man who's made a shit ton of money, had a shit ton of success. Yeah. And I happen to know that he's like really struggled. Mm-hmm. And it's like you look at people who have had, like you and I, we've had tons of success in our respective fields. And then you wake up and you're like, what the fuck? Like, I am so depleted and unhappy inside. And it's part of like why I want to do this podcast about like, not just talking about, I've talked about entrepreneurship a lot. But to me, this feels like the flip side of, this thing that we're all striving for. It's like, I feel so like when I look at Instagram and, it's so easy to get FOMO and you see these people who are working so hard for success. And then you're like, look at, they're doing all this and that. And I'm like, I don't really care.
Oh yeah. I have zero FOMO for that stuff. I look at that stuff. I'm like, those people are on so much dissociated adrenaline.
Which I was too.
And you were too. Yeah. And I was too at a point.
Yeah.
And I have compassion for them. And I do think, knowing you for almost 20 years, like you're a deeply sensitive being. And I think you're actually just now catching up to that part of yourself.
Yes, totally.
that there was a part of you that had to put that away to get the success that you had to get. And I don't think that that's bad. You know, I think that it's like, we all have different
part of the path.
It's part of the path. Like what is all grist for the mill. Mm-hmm. So it's like, there is no one listening, or you and I, like, we shouldn't have any regret. I don't have regret over my 2 marriages. I don't have regret for the things that where I may have not been my best self in life. I don't have regret for selling the company and not having, I'm on my 4th career. For entrepreneurs out there, like, you can continually evolve. Yeah. I mean, I've never worked in corporate America. I mean, I worked in the film industry for a bit, and then I had my own event planning company, and then I had my shop, Midland, which I still have, and then now Riverbank, and now I'm doing more of the spiritual soul work. And it's like coaching and circles and whatever spirit says. But there's like a place where I think that should be the permission, especially for women. Yeah. Who, like, when we, like, the feminine of the world are the creative. Like, we are the ones. You don't see many men or hear many men doing a lot of, like, reinvention. Like, new jobs, new spaces. Like, they kind of find their groove, their path, and they stay there. Yeah. And you do see, like, right now, it's the time of the woman. Yeah. To, like, really break through those patriarchal norms and, like, the place where we can continue to explore, make new paths, make new jobs, create new visions. And I think that's happening in a lot of spaces, big and small. I want to circle back to the shame piece you said. Because if you remember, right before my wedding to Tal, which was just a year and a half ago, I actually did have some shame. I remember. I was like, wow, I'm noticing that I have shame around, like, the public aspect of that phone call. Yeah, of being like, why do I all of a sudden have this embarrassment, shame around getting married a 3rd time? And right then, I like, this is the current medicine to work with. I gotta allow this in. What is it informing me of? What wants to purify? What do I need to let out? And if I had resisted it, it would have stuck around. Or if I would have bypassed it and been like, oh yeah, just. Like, everyone...
Like, I've had seen you, like, not talk about it.
I mean, not people... Like, when you voice things, and even we do this to each other, friends with pure intentions can sometimes be like, you shouldn't feel that way. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We should each other, we shouldn't each other. Mm-hmm. So it's like, getting to the place of speaking that, I have shame. And people saying, you shouldn't feel that way. Yeah. It's easy to go, yeah, I shouldn't. I should just carry on. Right.
But then it's there. And
it's there, no matter what. Yeah. So it's not, of course, that they're all well-meaning, and they are reflecting something to me that, like, they're not judging me. Mm. But the deeper work is that I feel shame. And why do I feel shame? Where is that coming from? Is my choice in question? No. Like, it's spiraling inward, going from that outer ego to the inner soul, and coming to the place of, this is grief, this is anger, this is societal conditioning, whatever it might be. You can make sense of it in the mind, but then it's feeling it, it's crying, it's letting it out, it's speaking it, it's being witnessed in it, not holding it in a box.
Yeah, yeah. And I was going to say, how did you get through that in that moment? But I think that you're answering that.
Yeah. And it's like, you do, I think you posted something on Instagram that was great. I think Brandon Collinsworth said, where it was like, Kobe had a coach and everyone had a guide. And I think there's such incredible encouragement for everyone to have that, like a mentor, a guide, a friend, even who was going to give you the hard truth, who's going to give you the messy truth. Yeah, who is not going to let you bypass your shit. Yeah, yeah. It's not going to let you.
Well, and that's part of that's an important thing to point out too, is like surrounding yourself with those people, which I never did. At all. Like I remember, I bring this up a lot. Like I remember it was Ellen Bennett was on my podcast that I did with Michael, and it was years and years ago, and she talked about she was bringing on an executive coach. This is before Adrian and before I really knew what that coach was. Yeah. It is like a CEO coach. And I remember my brother, of course, making a joke like, you need one of those, So I was like, well, we need one of those. Just being like, one ear out the other. I was like, that seems weird. Like, why is she doing that? Judgment. but now, like, yeah, I mean, I saw that and remember that post that you're talking about. Now I really seek out lots of people.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I've learned in my life, which, you and I have talked about a lot, is like, not one, and this also I think has to do with my relationship with men too. It's like not one person can be everything to you, and like you need your girlfriends and you need, in my case, I work with a coach. I have a somatic therapist, I clock a lot of hours with you, but I get such different perspective.
Yeah.
From you, from my coach, from my somatic therapist, and then I get to like take all that in and be like, this works, this doesn't work. I like this, I don't like that, and I think that we don't, as a society, really allow ourselves that, I think it is like almost like a breaking down of
the ego,
yeah,
of the crust, of
yeah.
the thing, all this stuff, again, that is living outside of you and inside of you, that has to come into alignment.
Yeah.
And I think as an entrepreneur, you see so many people that they're really like, they don't even know how to speak it, but they're so hungry for their soul to be in alignment with their job. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's like, as an entrepreneur, whether you're trying to raise millions of dollars or you're just trying to, bag some groceries, like there is honor in all of it, and there's joy in all of it if you can feel the soul alignment and in your body, not dissociated from it, and not performing from a space of comparison or from ego, like really coming into that like harness real power, to make like whatever your karma is, whatever your path is in this life, in a higher vibration. Yeah. And you can really feel into that energy of people when they're not aligned.
As somebody who's done a lot of work on myself and I read a lot and I ingest a lot in a lot of different ways, and then sometimes I'm like, I kind of just want to watch a movie and like space out and not be thinking about all this stuff. But oftentimes I don't really like, the night will run out and I'm like, oh, it's already like 10 o'clock. I should probably like listen to a meditation and go to sleep because I'm really tired, But I think about like myself 5 years ago or even 4 years ago or maybe even 2 years ago, like I get in bed and turn on a show because in my mind I was like, I need to numb out. Like it's been a day and, and I think about how for so many years, my whole life, I've done that instead of doing this work, journaling, listening to like, books that are going to make me like think about things and ponder things. And then I think about like, what we're talking about. It's just like how many people, I mean, obviously our world is like in so much pain for so many different reasons right now. And it's like, so many people are bypassing working on themselves, I mean, we've talked so much about this and I so strongly believe in like the collective. It's like, if everybody just does their little part and makes themselves a little bit better, like how much better the world be. Yeah. But you just get so distracted with it all.
Yeah. And I think there's also the place where people probably just feel at some point it's too late for them. Yeah. Like their shame or their self-judgment or their mistakes in life, which I don't even like that word mistakes, like whatever they have been carrying, they can't lay it down because there's just so much. Like I see it all the time with people who come into circles. It's like they start talking and it's just like, what do? They apologize for crying. They apologize. A lot of them will say, I feel embarrassed speaking this. Like we're just so attached to our identity or how we should be that there is like no freedom to lay it down. Yeah. And there is the place of toxic positivity in the culture and the bumper sticker world, I call it, where it's like there is something on Instagram every day, like just be grateful, just be positive. And you see that and you're like, okay, I can be grateful. And also I'm really angry today and I'm really sad today. So I'm going to try to be grateful. But right now I've got to sit with the sadness. Yeah. And I think the more that we can hold space for each other in those feelings, the more they go quicker. Yeah. It's like, funny example is like after that last retreat that we were on and I moved that big piece of anger and grief, the amount of people that come to you after and they're like, are you okay? Like, I know I can see you're carrying a lot. And I'm like, I'm good.
Better now.
Yeah, like when you can really clean out enough inside, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
That it's just a pure channel. Like, I just gotta move this grief and anger.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I'm calling my dad. Hi, how's it going? Love you.
Yeah.
But other people's projection are that I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Because, again, they don't give enough space for it to move.
Yeah.
So it gets so compacted.
It's so fascinating. I mean, it's so true. It's like, I was just saying this somewhere, like, name it, tame it to name it, name it to tame it.
I'm not.
You know, where it's like, just,
You love a quip.
I do. Well, it's because it's like, it is so true.
No, it is, yeah.
You know, it's like, to your point, like, you opened up about something that was really painful for you, and just doing that in and of itself was so freeing for you.
And there wasn't even, like, I don't even need to speak any context.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
Yeah.
There wasn't, like, I needed to tell my story about my childhood. I didn't need to say anything. I was just like, hello, Jan, I have some grief and anger I need to move.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, let's do it. And then it just came out.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't resisting it, and it wasn't fearful of embarrassment, and I wasn't going to apologize. I was just like, I'm going to be in the pure primal release right now.
Yeah.
Of this overwhelming need to cry and yell and be angry. And then sitting at lunch on the deck with my friends, and I feel great. I feel lighter. I feel emptier. I feel like, okay. So it's like allowing yourself to become this open vessel, which I think is what you're talking about too. Like, you're getting so in touch with yourself. You're becoming more sensitive and aware that you're noticing, like, okay, 3 days on the road, all I want to do right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to be home more.
If you allow yourself time to get quiet, you allow yourself to really listen.
Yeah.
What's going on? It's crazy.
Yeah.
I have another good quip. What we resist persists.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite ones too. And I think that we live in so much resistance about the things that we don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, that it's so toxic. Like, it's, you know, and I don't know if you remember this from when my kids were little. I used to, I think it was like a therapist who said it once, like, I would tell my kids, because they were so young and didn't have language for, like, talking about their feeling, and then say, you need an emotional poop. Do you remember that? And because I was like, which my kids thought was funny at the time. Now they're like, really, Mom? I'm like, yeah, we used to talk about this. And they're like, no. But, you know, because it was like, I would explain to them, like, if you don't go to the bathroom for several days or weeks or months, like, you will get very sick. Like, your body literally has to release the toxic. Your body's very smart, and it releases the stuff that it doesn't want, the stuff that's not good for it, it's not nurturing. It's, you know, and I remember, like, it resonating with me so much that therapist said that, and this was years ago, which I was, like, trying to impart on my children and was not taking for myself, clearly, was like, oh, you've got to get this stuff out and flush it out, which I think was, like, an insightful thing at the time that I didn't even think about using on myself, but I was, you know, we care about our kids more than anything. We want them to be happy and mentally healthy, and so I know that, like, them talking about their feelings would go a long way.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I also want to circle back to, you know, when we were talking about being on, you know, the path that we're on, and there's no mistakes, you know?
Yeah.
And I really feel like that. And it's funny, again, watching myself, it's funny to speak it because I haven't thought about it quite like this, but I know I'm, like, watching myself more than I ever have. And, like, I'm catching myself in, like, moments where, you know, and I know this will resonate with you deeply. It's like, we want our kids to do and be certain things. We are like, why don't you do this more? Why don't you do this more? And, you know, and I notice that with my kids where I'm like, oh, you would love this thing. And, you know, Kit, you should watch this and do that. And usually they throw up a wall and they're so resistant to that. And I've noticed that I'm like, oh man, I just know if Kit watched this, he would love it. And it would maybe resonate with him. Or if I just told him this thing, you know, and then I'm like, you know what? It's not my thing to tell him right now. Not in that way.
Yeah.
You know, not in the way of, like, you should try this or you should do this, versus, like, just allowing, you know, and, like, the way that we try to control our children. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's tough. It's tough for a 12 because we're, like, guiding them. But, you know, I mean, you were the one who turned me on to that poem years ago that was like, we're just a compliment for our children.
Khalil Gibran would.
But it's interesting being a mom and, like, watching how we do that to our children, you know, of trying to guide them and versus, like, just letting them find their own path and their own way. You know?
Well, we're both control freaks.
Yes.
And we're in recovery.
I was like, we're working on
Yeah,
that.
and we worked out, and I don't know many people. I mean, there are definitely people out there that are not, but I think it is again another part of the feminine wound. Like women really try to strategize, manipulate, control behind the scenes in a form of love, in a form of attachment, whatever it might be. I'm definitely guilty of it. Jan has called me out on it, and Tal has called me out on it, and there's just like. Again, that witness consciousness, becoming more and more aware of like, am I reaching out to Remy? Am I reaching out to Alli, Kelly, Tal, whoever am I reaching out to? What's my motive? Like, am I reaching out with the intention to just connect, to be loving, to be in conversation, or am I wanting something from them? Because then you have to shift into the vibration of being honest about that. Like, you know what? I want something right now. I want something from Alli. What's the cleanest way to do that? Be direct. Be be kind. Whatever it might be. Speak it. Like, you know, Kit.
Without like sugarcoating.
Without, without, and without shoulding or the shouldn'ting or without any judgment or manipulation. Like when you can start to realize that every conversation could be a manipulation or a judgment, or you're just listening to respond versus hearing, you get really close to yourself. Like, I am just always trying to get.
Well, and it's interesting because you and I have had this conversation so much because I'm like, yeah, like I feel like manipulation and drive are so closely connected.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like, for me, I'm like, yeah, and like, I'm always thinking, I'm always moving, I'm always trying to like do something.
Strategizing.
Yep. Strategizing, yeah. And then, you know, I mean, you've pointed this out to me a lot where I'm like, it's not like it's a bad thing. Like, I guess manipulative feels like the worst word. Like,
yeah.
It's a bad word. And I'm like, no, but I did want that. I was trying to manipulate that situation.
Yeah.
Why is that a bad thing?
Yeah.
But to your point, I think like being direct is very different than like, I'm strategizing a way to manipulate this situation or this.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many undercurrents that we really cannot, like sometimes we're just not aware of that we're operating from.
Yeah.
So for me, with my son too, and with everyone I've loved, I have done it. Yeah. I have found a way to get what I want, and it's not necessarily been really, you know, it hasn't been malicious. My intention was pure, but my mechanism wasn't. And that's where I think the place has to get, like, the more conscious we become, the more we realize, like, okay, I gotta clean up my language here.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, Rem, I saw this, and I thought you might be interested. No pressure if you're not. Just sending it on. Yeah. What do you think? And he's like, yeah, no, that's not for me. Then being like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But to be like, you should take this class.
Yeah.
You should do this, Rem.
Yeah.
Then he's automatically in like, whoa.
Yeah.
Why are you telling me what to do?
I'll tell you what to do.
And
I think it's the same of adults.
Totally.
Adults, you know, it's like, it's the way we present things.
Yeah.
You know, which I want to talk about, because this reminds me of like the reflection circles that you do, which I want to, talk about for anybody who lives in LA. Paige and I have this place called Riverbank, and it's really Paige's baby, and it's a spiritual nourishment center where all kinds of amazing, beautiful things happen from, you can get acupuncture, you can get
cranial sacral.
That is amazing. Or sound baths, all different kinds of spiritual offerings. And one of the things that Paige is doing most frequently there is these reflection circles, which I feel like I want you to talk about, because I don't think a lot of people know or understand what that is. And it's funny, I was just explaining it to Traver, who was also on the podcast, about because he does these men's group that are really beautiful and empowering, just so what the world needs in the man department. But I was telling him, about the reflection circles and how the idea is that, you're sitting in a circle holding space with, a bunch of people. And the idea is that you're not supposed to give advice or, tell it, opinion about yourself or talk about yourself. It's more just like you're quite literally reflecting what people say back to you. I was like, what's been the most fascinating to me about all of that, I mean, there's a lot of things, obviously, like just having to be so present and make sure you're really listening so you can reflect back, that you're not like spacing out thinking about my own thing. But then just, you've said this a lot in Circle, it's like you don't even realize when you're sharing what you're you don't even remember what you said. And then someone reflects it back to you and you're like, that is how I feel. Like, how did you know? You know, like that trippy thing that happens. So talk a little bit about how, you know, you came to, you know, form these circles that are growing in popularity and, you know, what's experience them, they want more.
Yeah. I mean, we have a couple of virtual ones for anyone who does live in LA.
I'm just trying to get people.
Yeah, but people coming to in person is
very different
and more potent, and the space is beautiful. The reflection circles have been life-changing. I mean, the circle work I do with Jan is very different and also life-changing, but the reflection work is really like it's such an embodied practice, because like you said, you're coming with the awareness that you're able to take up space and that everyone is going to listen to you and reflect to you and validate you without hijacking you. So most times in life, even in best friendships, we are hijacking each other. I'm sharing like, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated with Remy's doing this. And what do you say? Oh my gosh, me too. Grant is so frustrated too. Yeah, right.
It's like our natural instinct.
It's your natural instinct. And it's, again, there's no like lack of good intention, but we're operating again so much from this unconscious of a good intention. And then the good intention isn't getting followed through with the cleanest mechanism, or the cleanest, you know, way of showing up. So one, I think people come into the reflection circles and just the freedom that they know no one is going to talk about themselves while I'm sharing. So it's Alli's turn to share, and you get to express whatever's on your heart, your mind. Sometimes it's hard and you want to cry, and other times it's like joy and lighter. And then people are listening with their hearts. And when we listen with our hearts, our ears actually open wider. It's like crazy how much when you don't need to respond or self-present, you can really just reflect back like, oh, I hear you're struggling with your husband right now. I heard that you're actually moving a lot of grief. And then you're like, wow, I feel really heard.
Yeah.
And then you can start to metabolize it. You're witnessed by a group, which is so much more powerful than talk therapy for me. Talk therapy has its place and it's great, but when you're witnessed by a few other people who are able to reflect what you're going through and then offer validation, like and I'm oversimplifying, but that's so hard. Well, I didn't imagine. Yeah.
And I'm obviously, I've been in a lot of circles with you that you are facilitating, and I always find it so refreshing and amazing and interesting to hear, you know, some of the women who've been in group circle with us are like, wow, I didn't know anything like this existed.
Yeah. And
it's this place for women to go to get that kind of, you know, feeling really heard, feeling really seen, being able to hold space for other people. And the surprise of like, yeah, where's been all my life? Yeah. You know, which is like, you know, why I'm so proud to be partnered with you on Riverbank, because I think it's like important work, you know, that we're doing and that you're doing. And I'm just witness to but, you know, just showing up and seeing how it impacts people. And I love it so much. And I know you do too.
Impactful.
When you hear, you know, their response, it's like once people come in for a circle, like they're hooked and they're like, oh, how have I not been doing this? Yeah. You know, and it is a really sacred, special place, you know, that it's like, it's so funny. It's the same thing I was saying to Traver, who was like, you know, holding these men's circles. I'm like, you are doing really important work. You know, and I was saying to him, like, I want you to get really popular because I want more men to do this work. And same thing with us, but why I'm so happy to be involved with this with you, because it's like, you know, the collective again. It's like if everybody was doing this kind of work, you know, and I think people are coming out to it.
Yeah. And it's a space to do, like, you're reflecting internally and someone's reflecting to you. And so it's like a double hit of like real good medicine. And you're not in a silo alone, and you're not with a talk therapist that is just, you know,
they're like for you.
Yeah, and also like a talk therapist can only see one perspective. You have like 8 other people reflecting back what they see in your higher self. Like they're looking at your soul. They're validating something that you don't even know you said. Like, it's incredible, without making it about themselves. And it's a practice to take into your life. So it's not even just like you're doing the inner work in circle. You go out in life and you're like able to have more space and presence for someone else, your family, your colleagues, your employees, your whoever, your friends, and you're able to sit and listen and be like,
yeah. I know it makes such a difference, and it's so important. And I find myself in resistance sometimes to it, as you know, sometimes after like a 3-hour circle, I'm like, but it is spiritual exercise, truly to like hold space for people and to hold space for
and your
yourself.
capacity grows.
And your capacity grows.
Because I think what you just said is so beautiful that even like for 3 hours, you're like, at this point, you're like, I can do 3 hours because you've done 8 hours in Jan circles. Yeah. So it's like someone who first comes in and they're like, oh, this is all longer than an hour. I'm like, don't worry, you'll get there.
Yeah.
You'll be able to hold space for 2 hours or whatever. And I think that's also a practice. Like we're practicing patience and presence of like no phones. You're just with each other in this really beautiful container.
Yeah. And it is like, for us being the age that we are, it's like our children have grown up, like even like you guys over there, my young friends, like always grew up with like a cell phone, and the way that you've always been, the younger generations are always able to be attached and connected. When we weren't, when we were kids, I think for us, it's like going back to a more like sacred time when we were not able to like we weren't so accessible, as we are now. And I think to your point, being in circle and you don't have your phone and, and for me, it's like one of the other things I love about it, and then we can wrap this conversation up, but is like, I really love like witnessing the human experience, like to be, and I remember experiencing this one of the first times I went to AA with Adrian, and I couldn't believe how people shared and it's things that they told a group of strangers about like abuse and deep sadness and hitting rock bottom and these things. And I was like, holy shit. Like I didn't talk because I was in the program, but I would listen and be like, this is the greatest thing ever. Not that I'm happy for the pain that people have been in, but like the fact that they're just holding space. People feel like they can talk freely without judgment. And in AA, it's not reflective, right? Like you just talk and that's it. But which also, to me, I was kind of like, or if they just said all this stuff and that's it, But I remember being so, that was my first like foray into this kind of work of being like in a room with people telling you like their deepest, darkest stuff. And being like, wow, like I want to be in more rooms like this, and AA is one vehicle, but like what we're doing with reflection circle, what you're doing is really,
well, because you can see that there's interconnectedness of all beings, because like someone else might have had a drug problem, someone else might have lost a loved one, but like you can touch into all the things as a human being when you're really in the presence of it and be like, I can feel that pain even if I haven't experienced it. And it opens your heart and to the compassionate journey of this human experience that we're all going to face some hardship.
100%. Yeah.
And it's just it's a practice of embodiment, like you said again about the cell phones. Like most of the time, even for us, we're living out here.
Yeah.
So when you can again just come at home to yourself, just like come into a place where like it's an out breath where you're like, I just sit with myself.
What do you think the key to a happy life is? You have a field day with this one. This is like Change 101.
The key.
It's been interesting, the different answers.
I think the key to a happy life is not to resist anything that comes. To be able to be with all of it. The whole show.
Yeah.
The good and the bad. And not get in hesitation or resistance. Just allow it in. Allow it out.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like the bad isn't always bad. It's like,
it's
not like I'm in this like interesting place around this, like where I'm like, oh, because you say to me all the time, like, you gotta just sit with what is. And it's like, I don't want what is to be what is. But now I'm like,
yeah,
I don't care what is.
I mean, if you can be in flow with what is, the gray, the black, the white, the gray,
and you're gonna be good.
Yeah,
and happy.
Love you. Thanks for being out the messy truth.
Always. I mean, like,
keep going for an hour or two.
We'll do another one.